Yes, because yeah, lovely. You stimulated so many thoughts. Um, in my experience, if I can just share this with you, it really, if you can imagine being in South Africa, and if you were black, your rights were whipped away from you on every level. And I worked a lot with teachers in, let's say, black ghettos or areas where black people had to live, and it was really, really hard. And then they went to school there being delivered a really autocratic education with a stick. The stick was there. You did it because the stick was there. And then when I worked for the department, there were new laws, and one of them was no more corporal punishment in schools. And that was a huge thing for people, where they felt we were taking away their power as teachers and parents. But what I also found was that, so you would think people are happy about that, and at last, there won't be this cruelty in a way and violence. Um, People who were most afraid of change and really hated that were people themselves who were traumatized. And, you would think, well, surely it makes sense to you that if you had such a tough time visited on you when you were little, you wouldn't do that to children when you're an adult. And I asked people about it because it really stunned me, about how can you forget what happened to you when you were little? And they said, well, it happened to me, and I don't see why they should get away with it. And I don't see why they should be different, because I suffered it, and why shouldn't they also? And so there was this incredible feeling of unfairness and injustice. And how come I got to suffer that and these guys go scot-free? In fact, they enjoy their learning. You want me to bring joy into the classroom? Are you crazy? It was a nightmare for me. Why should I do it for others when I didn't have it? So, long story short, what I realized was that when people have a real problem with something like that, children playing, being expressive, sharing the wonder that they have for the world, this naive belief in goodness, it acts as a kind of confronting mirror as to what they don't have. And it's like, why the heck should you be all free? You free because I go and win them, get the money and pay for the rent that puts the roof over your head, and you can just be, free and unfettered. And so I think a lot has to do with unacknowledged pain and trauma in adults who can't stand that reminder. It's not that that they have a real problem with the noise. It's that they have a problem with the reminder and the deficit in their lives. And it's painful. I mean, you can imagine how much joy we get just by being with children because we know it and we acknowledge it. Imagine if you're not allowing yourself to feel that. So you kind of experience more and more pain with the reminder of what you've lost, and the cynicism that you live in now prevents you from seeing that. So kind of when I realized that many years ago, I just felt so much compassion, whereas at first I was really angry and upset, and can't they see? And I just realized that this person needed to find their inner child and shed the tears and go through what they'd lost, acknowledge they'd lost that feeling, and really be, in a way, a parent to their own inner child and say, I'm so sorry, my dear child, that you had to go through this. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. You were little. You couldn't defend yourself. And I am now going to listen for you, and I'm going to listen out for you for what nourishes you truly, and give it to you, whatever you missed. So I think that for me is like the turning point. So yeah, which is this kind of question about, can you even remember? All of us as children had one happy memory at least once, with one lovely person, once even, maybe a grandfather or an auntie or a something. And I find it really helpful to go back in that space where you felt, I had this experience where somebody just loved me for who I was and acknowledged that I was a person, and where I felt free and I felt like I could just take a deep breath and say, it's all safe and it is as it should be. If we can get to a place like that, that's the little seed point to grow. Yeah.
Can I jump in? Yeah. Thanks, Carol. We discussed more about this process, of connecting with the inner child, and then how that looks in a bigger picture. Maybe there's a way where it can become a practice, a daily practice. And for me, when one of the key moments from my memory of this connection is just a simple situation where we were at a friend's house, and one of their friends, I was maybe 8 or 9, and this man was a friend of theirs, and I'm one of 6 kids, so there's always a lot of things to do for my parents, and there was very little time for them to sit down and read a story for one child, or even 2 or 3 even. There was always a baby in our house, and I was the second eldest, so there was always a baby around. But so this man, he sort of recognized that. He was like, oh man, there's 6 kids in this family. The thing I can do, I can bring that they might have had is I'll sit down. He took 3 of us downstairs, and he sat down and he started reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first book. And that's a big book. So usually as a parent now, if you're reading a bedtime story, you kind of go for the shorter one. Maybe the short chapters. So you're not there all night. You just a quick story before bed. But this guy went for the whole book, and he started reading, and he was probably reading to us for about 2 hours, straight. And sometimes we were listening, and sometimes we were playing with something, but mostly we were in that dreamy sort of state. And that's the key moment, just something so simple like that. And then on the flip side, when I was teaching, did my placement teaching in class 4, and we went on a camp with the kids, the usual 5-day camp. And it was coming on evening. There was a time where there was nothing going on, no activities or programs. And so I got out a book I was reading and sat down, and it was nearly sunset, so just that dusk sort of moment. It was really nice. I found a nice little spot where I could just sit and read. And another boy came over. He got his book. He saw what I was doing, got his book out and sat next to me. And the book I was reading, I wasn't really into it. I was just, it was The Golden Light, I think. And I was reading it, but just being there and just enjoying that moment. And this boy was sat next to me. He did the same for like an hour or so. We weren't talking or engaging, but we were just sitting together, enjoying as the sun went down. And then at the end of that 10-week placement, it was a really lovely experience, because we sat in a circle and each child said, oh, Jake, I really liked how you played games, or I really liked how you taught that lesson about the animals, or whatever it was. And this boy says, I remember sitting with you at that camp, and just for that hour. And it was really lovely. That was the main thing I remember. It was really beautiful. And that was 11 weeks prior, and that was the key moment of all the things I did, all the lessons I brought, or content I brought, or songs or games or whatever, just sitting down with him, reading the story, not even to him, just, we were separate. We had our own stories. We were just experiencing that moment. And that's as simple as it can be, really. And then, so it got us thinking, how to bring this into a practice where you can get to those moments more regularly with your children. And so you're connecting with your inner child, and then being able to connect with your own child or family. And when you're in that zone, it's like being in the flow. And for me, I just wanted to share my process. What I'm sort of working on now is at one point, there's an element of respect on one hand. So I sort of think of a circle or of a clock face, if you like. At 3 o'clock, there's this element of respect. Reverence is another word for respect, or Carol mentioned wonder. So being amazed or wondered, or engaged and respectful of the person or being in front of you. and really engaging on that level as people, you know, as human beings. There's that level that that sort of like a gateway towards connectedness, if you like, at number 3. And then at 6 o'clock, you've got this idea of acknowledgement or sympathy as well. And the acknowledgement part is when you're actually taking in what that child is experiencing. That's where you're getting to this connectedness with the child. So you're acknowledging where the child's at and trying to sympathize with the way they might be experiencing that moment. And that could be in any form. It could be a tantrum, or it could be just that they want to sit with you for a while, but you might need to do the dishes, or it might be that they really need to go out, but they don't want to get dressed to go out. You know, all the little things that happen in parenting life. So acknowledgement is down there at 6 o'clock, and then that leads to 9 o'clock over here in the circle, where you've got empathy. And this is where you can say, I can see that you really don't want to get dressed to go out. I totally get it. Pajamas are comfortable, they're warm. You know, you really embody that. You can experience the warmth of their pajamas. You can experience the fact that they don't want to take them off to get other clothes on, which are cold. You know, my daughter said that today. She's like, I don't want that shirt on, it's cold. I was like, it is, yeah, sure, it is kind of cold. Yeah, why would you put that on? You know, so I pretended to warm it up with my hands. But, you know, that's part of it, is to really empathize. And that can be on any topic or any subject or whatever it is. I can tell that you don't want me to go to work because, I've been at work all week and you just want to spend some time with me. And that can be painful for adults to empathize with, because that's a feeling that, and it brings up so much, guilt or anxiety or a feeling of lack, or, not being perfect. Or abandonment either. It brings up all these kinds of feelings, which we usually try and not feel, we try and avoid. But if you can really engage with that and take it on, then you can move through empathy to find what Carol calls love in action. So you can find the right action to take which is guided by love, and includes all the things or the journey that you've just been on. And then what you do with the child, or the words you say, or the action you take, will be true and real and to the moment, and specific for that child in that moment, or the family. You'll know that it's the right thing because you'll get a bit of a buzz. And that's where I sort of like to think of it like a flow form. And if you don't know what flow form is, it's if you just Google biodynamic flow form, it's a biodynamic agriculture practice where you take water and you sort of spin it like this. I'll do it slower, like that, right? And it energizes the water, and then it moves on, and it goes into another little flow form where it does this, and it energizes it and moves on. But you're basically energizing water, which is a great thing to think about anyway. And so when you're in that flow and you're taking this practice, then you sort of build on this feeling of love in action, or truth, and the right things come at the right time. Like, you'll say the right things at the right time without thinking about it. You'll do the right things at the right time. And then you'll find a flow with the family, which makes up for a beautiful day, or a beautiful week, a beautiful month. And the challenging thing that we're talking about today is trying to find that flow, or maintain that flow, with all these boulders or rocks that people keep throwing in there, or dams that people keep on making. They make a dam here, and you've got to try and make the flow stronger to push through that bit of the dam. So yeah, I think now more than ever, it's really important to find that flow and energize it. And I feel like that's what you're doing, Melissa, is that you're energizing this movement. You've started the flow form, which is really energizing for Carol and I, and for I imagine for lots of parents out there who need the energy right now.
Yes. Wow. Thank you so much for what you both shared. It's amazing. And what you've just shared, Jake, leads me actually to a story I would love to share, which I feel like would be very beneficial, maybe potentially to people as well, because of what you know, everyone's experiencing. I had a job a couple of years ago where I had 3 children, 2 days a week, 2 10-hour days a week, a baby 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And the previous year, the 6-year-old was in kinder, so we only had to get everyone ready for one drop off. And we were in such a beautiful routine, and we had such a beautiful rapport. It didn't even cross my mind that in the new year, that now that the 6-year-old, well, she was now 6, is in prep, and the 4-year-old is now in kinder, that the experience would be any different than the beautiful flow it had been the previous year. So I turned up to they'd had their first 2 drop-off days with mum and dad, and I was doing the 3rd day. And I hadn't even considered that they might have anxiety about it, about their new routines and their new structure and their new positions. Anyway, so, you know, I went through our usual, we had our breakfast, and then I asked them to put their uniforms on, and they just flat out refused. They were giggling and they were running around and playing chasey and, you know, taking off their pajamas so that they didn't have any clothes on, and they're going, "Chase us, Mel." They're going, "Come on, play chasey." They're going, "Chase us, Mel." And I'm like, we're already a few minutes late. And I myself was starting to get like the anxiety. And no, but we're going to be late. And I was like, but no. And I noticed that I was having a very triggered experience by them not complying and falling into what I thought and felt they should be doing. And initially I tried to be a little firmer, like we need to get ready, we need to get there on time. And that made them get louder and sillier, and gigglier. So I went, okay. And then I tried to explain why we needed to be on time, forgetting that a 4-year-old and 6-year-old have no concept of time and don't care. And that didn't work either. And I decided to just surrender to what was going on and decide that it didn't matter what time. I decided, you know what? We'll get there when we get there. And I sat down and they started plaiting my hair, like trying to plait my hair. And I realized as I sat down and surrendered and they started doing my hair that the thoughts I was having about, but Charlotte's going to walk in late to, her first week of prep and everyone's going to be looking at her. I realized that was me. I went, oh, that's not, she doesn't look very anxious about, this is my anxiety. And I realized that was my thoughts about me walking into class late. And I surrendered to, me surrendering allowed me to make that connection and have that realization and release it. And once I realized that and released it, and then I said, okay, after you do my hair, how about you put your uniforms on? They went, okay. It shifted like that because I wasn't operating from that space of anxiety anymore. And I was owning my own trigger. It was opportunity to release it and allow myself to become the safe container for the children again. Because obviously whilst I'm having this experience, I'm not the safe container. It was such a huge moment for me, that learning and connecting with my inner child, like you've talked about, Carol. And this is probably a common experience, I imagine, right now, being at home in the 4 walls together with the limitations, and there's more opportunity for having our stuff triggered, and more the temptation to want to be in control is probably stronger as well, to get things back in order so that we feel like we know what's happening and we feel like we're in control. But I found that doing the opposite is what allowed me to get back into the driver's seat and in control, so to speak. So maybe what we could, did you guys want to add anything before I move on to our next?
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Just as you were talking and when Jake finished, what popped up for me was the important step of forgiveness
Mm.
is, you know, like what you were saying, Melissa, such a beautiful story and picture. And how many millions of times do we go through that with children? And this thing about trying to control the uncontrollable. And what's driving you is the anxiety based on your own experience. You actually want to protect them from your own experience that you had. You want to protect the little girl from coming in late at school and everyone's shaming her or whatever, or the teacher. And so it comes from a good place, actually. You know, your intention is one of protection, but then it immediately slips into control. And then whatever this child is doing is sabotaging your control. And so I think the little thing that I hear, I think, happen for you, and what we need to make space for is to forgive ourselves for both things. Forgiving ourselves for maybe making the mistake when we were little, which got us into trouble, but also forgive ourselves for feeling like we want to be in control, but we're not. So it's like both ways that you look. As like, I'm in this stuff, it's really hard, I acknowledge it. There's a lot of pain in me. I love this child. I want to protect the child. I wish she would stop doing that, but I understand it's because it's unsettling me. I forgive myself for that. So you've got to go through that whole thing and then say, okay, so now I'm bare, now I'm naked, lost all the protection I had. What needs to happen? And that's when you surrender. You got nothing to lose anymore because you've lost it all anyway. So I think that element of forgiveness is so vital to us being able to transform things. Yeah. Again and again. Yeah.
Definitely. And the funny thing is we got there. I'll just mute you so we don't have the and we were late, but so was everyone else because it's the first week of prep. It's like what really matters, you know. And what else we wanted to move towards discussing today and connecting with and thinking about was connecting with the vision of the dream of what it is, what our vision is for the future. What sort of world do we want to create and for the children? Like when we connect with our inner child, what sort of world do we want to experience and create? And how can we, first of all, how can we make space for that vision or connect with that vision that's already within us? Even if you maybe don't realize it, it's maybe there waiting to be acknowledged. And then also, how can we practically connect with it, like Jake has talked about in one of our chats so beautifully, bringing it forward to start being experienced now. For me, maybe I can start. Part of the reason I actually created the Australian Natural Nanny Network is because of that vision for the future, because the way that I operate and the way that I work with children is in a way that I feel has actually been very intimately linked with my own inner journey of transformation and development and connecting with the kind of life I want to live and the kind of world I want to live in. And that flows through to the way I work with children. So empowering them to connect with who they are and what's most important to them and what they're most passionate about. And I feel that the more we're able to raise children in this way, the more impact we have on the kind of world we're co-creating. And that world, my vision of the world that I would love to be living in is one where we are the freedom of the expression of our humanity. and that every person on the planet is connected with their mission and their vision and their sense of purpose, and are doing exactly what they feel most fulfilled by. Yeah, that's really it for me. And having this discussion is part of pulling that forward.
Can I jump in and then Carol, you go? Yeah. There's a, I think, yeah, what you're talking about, Melissa, there's a prefigurative practice in the feminist world where we look at utopia, yeah, and we bring it forward to now. And I guess part of that is having a shared vision, or, you know, of what that utopia is. So, you know, individually, but then sharing that with each other and finding, you know, oh, you have this vision too, or, and actually it's the realization, deeper realization is that it's a human vision that we all share at a deeper level. And then working out the barriers to have that happen, and you know, to make it happen now. And you can, the tricky bit there is that you can get bogged down in the barriers. You know, you can find, oh, there's a law against that, so we better not do that, or we better spend the next 10 years fighting against that law so we can do that thing. But actually prefigurative is doing it now, you know, not regardless of the law exactly, but doing it now, having those vision come alive right now, whatever form that takes. And then as the barriers or blockages or oppression comes up, then you're reflecting that barrier against this utopian vision, and then the barriers lose their power. And I hope that's not the best way of explaining it, but this is the way we're moving through this podcast, is to bring these ideas up and to crystallize these dreams into a reality together. And I think that's the idea, is that if the listeners can comment or chime in on how they can see their utopia come into existence now, to help us to make it happen, to re-energize after all the restrictions and oppression that we've been experiencing, to get back to that shared vision.